Hello, Kidney Warriors! James here with Dadvice TV, your online kidney health coach, and this is Dadvice TV, episode number 256. Woo! When I started doing this, I never thought I would get up to 256 videos, and I'm not even stopping. There's going to be so much more coming down the road in the future. Now, for those of you that are new, welcome. Great to have you here. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button over on YouTube and give the video a thumbs up if you find the information helpful. My name is James. I am a kidney warrior diagnosed with stage 5 kidney failure, and my doctors did not give me a good outlook on life. But I worked very closely with my healthcare team, which included a whole bunch of doctors and, most importantly, a renal dietitian, and I learned how to start living healthier, being active, eating better, cutting out those bad habits. And I couldn't do it all overnight. It took some time, but by doing all those things, making those great little changes, I started to improve my overall health, which helped lift my kidney health enough that I got my energy back and I feel great. Now, tonight, we're going to be talking about something that a lot of kidney patients have to watch, and something that a lot of us get a little worried about, and it could be a little bit confusing. And I am talking about something I like to call the sneaky snake. It's my country in me. It is phosphorus, and holy cow, it seems to be in so many different things. But we're going to talk about phosphorus with the dietitian. We're going to talk about some foods you should keep an eye out for and some great tasting foods that are low in phosphorus that you should be considering adding to your meal plan. So let's go ahead. Let's bring on our co-host tonight from plantpoweredkidneys.com. You all know her. You all love her. Please welcome Shelby. Hey, Shelby.
Hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Again, my name is Shelby Anderson. I'm a registered dietitian at Plant Powered Kidneys. So I help kidney warriors stages 1 through 5 find their best kidney diet to, make sure that your kidneys are happy, healthy, hopefully improve function and make you more confident in your food choices. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm gonna get to talk about phosphorus, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I also get to talk about summer foods, which is another one of my favorite topics. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm excited to dive in.
Yes, and it is, I don't know if it's officially summer yet here in Ohio, but according to how much I sweat when I walk outside, that wall of heat hits me. Summer is here.
Yes. In Florida, it's definitely here. So I'm in Florida, and we know it's been summer for a little while now.
Yep, so let's go ahead. We're going to start kind of with some of the basics because we may have some people who are new here who are just starting to learn about phosphorus and what they need to know about it with having kidney disease. So what is phosphorus, and why the heck do kidney patients need to keep an eye on it?
Well, that is a great question. So phosphorus is a mineral. So it is found, it's found in food. It's found, in our environment. It's found in additives, all those types of things. But it's a mineral, and it's part of our bone, our teeth, our DNA, and as well as other parts of the body. So we have a ton of phosphorus inside of us, and we get it like from our diet, but our kidneys are part of the system that helps regulate the amount of phosphorus in our body. So it helps make sure that we don't get too much or too little. So it's really an important factor when we're talking about kidney disease, because like I said, our kidneys are responsible for making sure that we don't get too much or too little, or that we're getting rid of the phosphorus that we need to get rid of. As our kidney function starts to decline, our ability to get rid of that phosphorus becomes less efficient. So we're not quite as good at it. So oftentimes our phosphorus levels in our body tend to be higher than they need to be. And so this can lead to all sorts of, different side effects that we don't necessarily want to experience. Something else called like CKD, bone and mineral disorder.
Hmm.
That's something that we'll see often, but it involves our bodies not being able to regulate the amount of phosphorus as well as calcium, and some of the other hormones in our body. So it's not great for our bones. It's not great for our body. We don't want to have too much phosphorus that our kidneys can't get rid of.
And I've always kind of thought of phosphorus as kind of like it and calcium have a relationship. It's almost like they are magnets and they want to stick together, and you get too much phosphorus and all of a sudden it needs calcium. So like you mentioned, the bone and mineral disease, it starts pulling calcium out of your bones. And when I was diagnosed, I had the itchy, the little white powdery on me from too much phosphorus and that excessive itching.
Yeah, yeah. So, like you said, there's some really negative side effects that you would, feel physically, but also some that you might not even, notice. So, we really do want to be mindful of the amount of phosphorus that we're taking in. It's also a really important it's a really important nutrient that we talk about when we talk about kidney disease, because it's one that most Americans actually get too much of. So when we talk about like potassium, for example, oftentimes it's really hard to like actually meet the recommended amount of potassium that we need throughout the day. But when it comes to phosphorus, Americans and those usually following like a Western diet are pretty good. So we're usually getting too much. So again, when it comes to our kidneys and our kidneys, not being able to get rid of it as efficiently, most Americans and most of us eating a more Western diet are usually getting too much phosphorus.
Now, I know phosphorus is in a lot of foods. Why is it in the foods?
Well, so I mean, there's a lot of different reasons because phosphorus has a ton of different like it has a ton of different uses in our body. So it's not something that we want to aim for zero. We're not saying that it's like a completely bad thing. We're just saying that we don't necessarily want to get too much. So it's a part of like making sure that our cell membrane stays intact. It helps with like our body's like energy sources. It helps with our genes. It helps with maintaining like our pH. So there's a ton of different reasons why we would need phosphorus in our diet. We're not aiming for zero. So we do want to get some from our food. We just don't want to get too much.
Yeah, and I notice when I go shopping, things that are in boxes tend to have a lot more phosphorus additives. How can someone out there spot the phosphorus in food? Because it's not listed like fiber and sugar. It's kind of hidden. That's why I like to call it the sneaky snake.
Right. So that maybe I'll talk about like organic versus inorganic phosphorus first, and that'll kind of help us transition into why looking at phosphorus on a food label is so important. So phosphorus comes in two different forms that we can intake. It comes in the form of organic phosphorus and then inorganic phosphorus, and what that means is the organic phosphorus is going to be found naturally in foods. So it's going to be the phosphorus that's found in dairy, in meats, in poultry, eggs, nuts, legumes, vegetables, grains. We haven't added that phosphorus to food. It just occurs naturally there. Our inorganic phosphorus is the type of phosphorus that's found in phosphorus additives, basically the phosphorus that we as humans have added to food. Now, the important difference between the two, organic versus inorganic, is how much our bodies are actually absorbing, because there is a big difference there. So when we talk about that organic phosphorus, again, the phosphorus that's found naturally in foods, we're absorbing between 40 to 70% of that phosphorus. Now, when we talk about that inorganic phosphorus, that phosphorus that we've added to foods, we're absorbing almost 100% of it. So we're absorbing quite a bit more than that organic phosphorus. And so that's one of the first things that we'll look at when we're talking about nutrition and kidney disease, is limiting the amount of inorganic phosphorus, or those phosphorus additives. So as you're going through the store, um, you know, we really focus on looking at the ingredients list, and looking to see if there's any ingredients in there that contain the letters PHOS or phos, and that might be a part of like a bigger word, like
It usually
sodium.
is a very big word.
Yeah, I can't name them all because I don't have them all memorized. There's a ton of them out there. But we're really looking for that PHOS, because that means that it's a phosphorus additive.
Yeah, and if my memory is correct, a lot of times those additive versions of phosphorus are preservatives. That's why they're so prevalent in the boxed packages. That when you pull them off and you see an expiration date, and it's not this year, it may not even be next year. It's way out
Right?
there. You're like, how does this stay good and not mold in that amount of
Right.
time? Phosphorus.
Exactly. Yeah. So those phosphorus additives are actually used to preserve moisture and color, and then they also help like frozen foods keep really well. So phosphorus additives are really very common. There's not necessarily like one type of food where I've seen like more phosphorus than others. Really, you have to look out for phosphorus additives pretty much everywhere. Like any sort of packaged food that you get, look out for phosphorus, because I've even seen it on like frozen shrimp, for example. So I had another dietitian kind of point out like, hey, there's
Ooh.
phosphorus in frozen shrimp. And so I looked, and even there, like that packaged frozen shrimp, there was a phosphorus additive. So it shows up in cookies, in crackers, it shows up in like, again, frozen meals, anything like that, that can contain phosphorus additives. Another point that you made was that when we're looking at the food label too, we mentioned looking at the ingredients list,
Mhm.
but phosphorus isn't going to be listed under like the different nutrients. So for example, we can see saturated fat on the nutrition label, we can see sodium on the nutrition label. Now with the new regulations, we can see potassium on the nutrition label. Yay. But phosphorus isn't required to be listed there, so manufacturers don't have to list how much actual phosphorus is in the product. They're only required to list like the phosphorus additives that they include in the ingredients list, which for a lot of people can be kind of frustrating. But what that means for grocery shopping is that, one, yes, we do want to focus on whole foods, the foods that aren't necessarily packaged, to where we wouldn't have to add a phosphorus additive to it to keep it. But two, you just want to be looking at like that food label and trying to find brands that don't necessarily have those phosphorus additives in the ingredients.
Yeah, when I was first diagnosed, my phosphorus was extremely high. And one
Mhm.
trick that my dietitian taught me to help me, um, besides recommending using an app and looking up everything, was when I
Mhm.
look in the ingredients, if I see PHOS in the first half, put it down, or if I see it two or more times total in the ingredients, put it down. She was
Mhm.
like, you can have it once in the second half of the ingredients. Now,
Okay.
how does somebody, and that's just kind of a way to wing it, to make it simple when I was first getting started. How does
Right.
someone find out that maybe their phosphorus is too high and they should be watching it?
So that's a great question. So when we're looking at like testing how much phosphorus we have in our body, that's going to be something that it's going to be a lab that your doctor is going to order. So we can look at a couple different things, um, but like a phosphorus test isn't necessarily going to be like a common test that we see like just anyone get. So we'll really see like doctors and nephrologists want to like test your phosphorus, like, possibly when you first get like the diagnosis of CKD, but oftentimes like we'll see it more commonly in like the later stages of CKD. But you can get your like your serum phosphorus checked, and then you can also get like your vitamin D levels checked. You can get like a PTH, which is like a parathyroid hormone. You can get that one checked as well. You can get calcium levels checked. So there's a couple different things that your doctor will check when we're looking at phosphorus, but it's a lab that will be drawn. I will say, like, I'll have people more commonly have like potassium drawn, like basically a basal metabolic panel, that includes a lot of those electrolytes, but not necessarily phosphorus. Those will be drawn a little bit more often. And then the phosphorus, if it's not necessarily like high, it'll be drawn like every couple months. Unless it is high, then hopefully your doctor will have it drawn pretty regularly, or if not, you can ask to have it drawn.
Now, what are some foods that are high in phosphorus that we should be aware of?
Yeah. So, going back to the organic versus inorganic phosphorus, foods that are going to be high in phosphorus are going to be those packaged foods that have phosphorus additives in them. After that, dairy and animal proteins, so meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products, all of those are going to be sources of phosphorus as well. And then when we go into plant-based things, nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains are going to be sources of phosphorus. And then some vegetables as well are going to be sources of phosphorus. So again, it's in a lot of different foods, and we can't aim for zero because then there would be really nothing to eat. And we don't need to completely eliminate phosphorus. We just want to, make sure that you're not getting too much. So oftentimes our approach can be, smaller portion sizes of those foods that are higher in phosphorus. So when we're looking at those foods that are high in phosphorus, we can look a little bit further again at like how much we're actually absorbing. And we know from research that's come out pretty recently that the amount of phosphorus that we absorb from animal products is actually going to be a lot higher than the amount of phosphorus that we absorb from plant-based sources. So we're absorbing a lot more of the phosphorus that's found in like the dairy and the animal proteins, and less in like the nuts and seeds and beans and whole grains. So that's another factor to kind of consider when we're talking about phosphorus. We also want to be limiting the amount of animal-based proteins that we're taking in as well.
Another reason to have more greens on your plate.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now,
Yes,
we
yes.
we have a question here for someone. They asked, at what stage should a typical kidney patient start looking for the phosphorus? Since it's not a normal test that we do, is there a certain stage that, hey, maybe it's good to start checking and keeping an eye on it?
Yeah. So it's going to depend. Typically, we will see stages, CKD stages 3 through 5, really need to start watching and like limiting the amount of phosphorus that they take in. So that's really when it becomes like an important nutritional factor that we need to be thinking about. And that's really when you should be emphasizing to your doctor, if they haven't already checked your phosphorus levels, they need to be checking it regularly. So again, later stages 3 through 5, that's typically when we'll need to go ahead and just limit phosphorus in general, but that's when we need to make sure that we're having it checked. Now, it certainly doesn't hurt to have it checked earlier, but that's those later stages is typically when we'll really regularly check it.
Yeah, mine seemed to get under control when I got up to stage 4, but stage 5, my labs were all over the place. And I'll tell you something, I've gotten, I felt I knew a lot about my labs until just recently. I really started diving into my labs because of the bills I've been getting. A new year and my deductibles are outrageous, so I'm paying for my own labs. And I started looking at what each one was, and how much they cost. And some of these, like the vitamin D one, it's a bit expensive. I don't know why, but
Mhm.
whew.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it cost is a factor, first for sure. But other typical labs that we'll see drawn when you have, when you're struggling with phosphorus, or that's something that you and your care team are really looking at. Like you said, we'll see the vitamin D lab, and we'll check it regularly. We'll have people check their parathyroid hormone or their PTH, and we'll look at calcium levels as well. So those are all labs that you might have checked at the same time. So if you're going through your labs, like you said, and checking each one of them, it's pretty typical to see all of those checked at the same time, to really get a good idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I usually tell my doc, "Hey, let's do them all every time." And
Right.
then I got a bill for like the last 6 months worth of labs. My insurance didn't cover any of it, and
Oh my God.
it was a giant number. It was 4 digits. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Oh.
So I think I'm going to cut back on some of them, the ones that I really don't need. Things like my phosphorus, it's good now, so I might go
Mhm.
to yearly for that. Or at
Mhm.
least wait until I've met my deductibles. Then I'll be like, hey, let's go lab crazy and start getting it
Right.
while it's covered. Now, Martin asked, does phosphorus have to be listed on the ingredients?
So that's a really good question. So if you've added phosphorus into the product, so if you as a human have put a phosphorus additive into the product, technically it needs to be listed. However, again, they won't list exactly how much phosphorus is going to be inside of the product. So you know um, we won't be able to see, like, okay, there's 200 milligrams of phosphorus in here. Like, we won't be able to see that, but you will be able to see if they have added phosphorus to the ingredient list. Now, if there isn't phosphorus inside of the ingredient list, that doesn't necessarily mean that the product doesn't contain like phosphorus in general. That just might mean that there aren't any phosphorus additives in there. So you have to consider that as well. So for example, if you have like whole grain crackers, and you go through the ingredient list and you see that there's not any phosphorus additives, that's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not phosphorus in those whole grain crackers, because we know that there is phosphorus in whole grains. So you have to kind of take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great apps you can run on your phone to help
Right.
you get a good estimate of how much phosphorus is in the food. And a
Exactly.
lot of those apps are free, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll usually recommend Chronometer. That's typically like that's the most, yeah, so that's the most user-friendly one that I found. And they'll have like the brand names of things on there, usually. So a lot of times they'll have like a better analysis of the food, than the actual like food label. Or if you wanted to, you could go on like the USDA nutrient database. And sometimes they'll have the brand on there, like the specific brand. Sometimes they won't. So either of those are going to be resources if you wanted to know like the specific phosphorus content of a particular packaged item, or even of a like a whole food item, like an apple, for example.
Yeah, and they even have the Pro Renal Plus D multivitamin in their
Do they really?
database. Yeah, so you can
Okay.
say, "Boop! I took my 2 pills today," and all that gets added into all your nutrients. And what I love about that app is
Mhm.
I pay for it. I can't remember how much it is. It wasn't that much, but by paying for it, you get all these online graphs, and your doctors can access all of that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I get my labs done. My doc gets the results. I have to wait for him to okay them, for them to show up in the app for me. But he could
Mhm.
also go and look and say, "Hey, look, there was one point he's like, you're eating way too much yogurt. You got to cut way back. And here's why. Look at your lab. See where this is up? See this? That's from all this yogurt you're eating. Cut it down. You know, it's,
Mhm.
I was up for occasionally I get on those kicks where I'm like, hey, this is healthy, so more
Right,
must be even healthier, which of
right,
course it's not.
right.
Now, phosphorus is in a lot of sodas, correct? The dark colored sodas.
Yeah, yeah. So when we're talking about like kind of, if we wanted to give like a kidney nutrition 101, like a 30-minute class, dark colored sodas are like a big one that we regularly emphasize because they do contain phosphorus. So those lighter color sodas, if you're going to include soda in your diet, would be a better option because of the phosphorus content. Again, we do need to consider that there's quite a bit of added sugar in there. So
Oh,
I would recommend, um, like water with lemon or like fruit flavored water or something like that
water,
instead.
water, water.
Yeah. But if you don't necessarily want to, like if you're a soda drinker and you can't necessarily like switch 100%, to water completely, switching from dark colored sodas to lighter color sodas are going to be like step one.
Yep, very good. Now,
Mhm.
so you talked about some of the foods to keep an eye out on. More
Yes.
importantly, it's summer. Summer
Hmm.
means outdoors. Outdoors means picnics, getting together, and all that means eating, good eating.
Hmm.
What are some low phosphorus foods that we should be keeping our eye out on to add or that we can enjoy during these hot summer days?
Yeah. So yes, my favorite topic, what you can include and what yeah, what you should be eating. So I know we talked about everything like to avoid, to look out for, but there's a ton of things that you want to be including in your diet. Um, so one of the best summer foods, and one of the types of foods that's lowest in phosphorus is fruit. So fruit is just naturally a low phosphorus food group. And it's something that you definitely want to be including this summer. So fruit just naturally has a hydrating effect. So there's a ton of water that's in fruit, can help keep you hydrated, especially if you are, outside sweating, can't necessarily get enough water in. And then they're just full of a ton of different vitamins and minerals, phytochemicals, which basically just mean like plant chemicals that are going to be, beneficial to your health. So fruit is going to be one great option. So kind of depending on your labs and also other considerations, like any type of fruit is going to be a low phosphorus item that you can include in your diet. And like with any food group, we want to just make sure that you're getting a variety. So there's not going to be just one fruit that's going to be like the best fruit to include. We want to be making sure that you're getting a variety, so getting a variety of berries, getting a variety of melons, all those types of things, the different colors. Those ones are going to have different, nutrient compositions as well. So, fruit and then getting a variety of fruit, that's, my number one recommendation for low phosphorus summer foods. And your favorite one is going to be the best one.
Yeah, I tell you, and one of the things that I had to learn to keep an eye out on was portion control. I grew up eating watermelon,
Mhm.
especially with a lot of salt on it. You cut a big giant slice, just coat it in salt. Oh, it's heaven, delicious. But I had to learn. Okay, I need to find out what a portion of watermelon is, and I'll tell you, it's not very much. It's not those giant slices I used to eat.
Mhm.
Um, but portion control is really important. It kind of goes back to that, just because it's good, more doesn't mean it's still good or better for you. It can get a
Mhm.
little bit out of control. Um,
Mhm.
Luckily,
Right.
with watermelon, it's got a lot of fiber. So if you get too much, it has its own way of, it seems like, taking care of itself.
Right. That, or hopefully it'll keep you fuller for a little bit longer and more quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fruit is number one. But some other things to include. So like popcorn is going to be like a really light nice, summer snack. So again, if you get like the unsalted and do like, nutritional yeast, or you do some like, I had some people do like kind of a mix of like, it was like nutritional yeast, smoked paprika, like garlic powder. I forget the like the recipe, but they did like a Doritos popcorn. So if you need something, crunchy, um, then that is going to be like another great low phosphorus, summer item to include. It's a lighter grain. So that would be like another one. If you wanted to do like, you could, pop your own popcorn. That's how it's going to be like, yep, the best way. But some other brands like Skinny Pop is a low sodium popcorn brand, and they're really nice because they have those like small bags that can kind of help you with that portion control portion of snacking. So that's another like option for you if you wanted to include that, if you needed something to take to the beach or take on a trip. That's a really good low phosphorus one to include.
Yeah, and I made some popcorn earlier today for a snack. I use a brown paper bag. I put a
Hmm.
very small scoop of popcorn in it. It gets so big when it pops. And I
Hmm.
do it in the microwave, and then I put um, lemon and lime on it. And then I shake it
Ooh,
all up in there. Holy cow. Lemon and lime, you don't need salt or anything. It's got
okay.
this tangy flavor. Oh, I've gotten to where I absolutely love it. And I ate some of that earlier today as my afternoon snack.
Perfect, perfect. So that's a really good one too. I'll have to try that one. um, some other ones that we talked about, fruits, all that kind of stuff. Veggies are another one. So vegetables will contain, small amounts of phosphorus. But things like cucumbers, they're like full of water, so they're great to include. They're a low phosphorus vegetable. They're really nice to just, slice up and have as a snack. If you wanted to have dark leafy greens as well, like to anchor a salad, or to like mix into a smoothie or something like that, those are some other, lower phosphorus items as well. And oftentimes, like things like kale and whatnot, will be higher in calcium, which I know that we touched on calcium a little bit, but calcium has that binding effect with phosphorus, where calcium can help bind to phosphorus and then help with the excretion of phosphorus as well. So that is going to be kind of another, important factor to consider, not only just focusing on, low phosphorus foods, but also other foods that are going to be beneficial. So, getting the right amount of calcium, that number is going to be, determined by your doctor and dietitian. But those dark leafy greens, those can be helpful as well. So that's kind of another summer food that you can include, that we know is going to be beneficial for you.
Yeah, my favorite leafy green right now is spinach, cooked.
Okay.
Cooked, and then I'll make it like in an omelet or add it to something else. I'm on a
Hmm.
spinach kick right now.
Okay. Lately, I've been on arugula a little bit, but also bok choy. It's been really good, and it's been really nice to like take it, wash it, slice it in half, and then put it on a grill. So if you're like grilling out during the summer, like grilled bok choy, really really good, like delicious option for you. So
I
that's
have
another.
never tried it. So
Oh, it's really good. I like it. It has like a crunch, so it's a great option.
awesome. Are there
Hmm.
other good foods you recommend for low phosphorus this summer?
Definitely. So, we talked through a lot of those, like whole foods, like whole fruits and vegetables. If you needed like a sweet treat or something like that, if you wanted to do like a sherbet, just making sure it's like a non-dairy dessert. Again, dairy is going to be a big source of phosphorus in our diet, particularly in like the American and Western diet. So if you get like a sherbet or a popsicle or something like that, again, just small amount. But that those kinds of sweet treats for the summer to like help you cool off, or every once in a while, those are some other low phosphorus foods that you can include in your diet.
Yep, awesome. Um,
Yeah.
Anything else that we should really know about phosphorus before we open it up to questions?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, you know, again, we can't aim for no phosphorus in our diet, but we can just make sure that we're getting an appropriate amount. So that number again is going to be determined by your dietitian, but typically we'll have it under like 1,000 milligrams in a day. That's just kind of like a ballpark range, but just go ahead and like track how much phosphorus you're taking in, just to get a good idea of what you might be able to swap out, foods that you might want to have in smaller amounts, and then focus on those low phosphorus foods that you can include. So those fruits, those low phosphorus vegetables, those low phosphorus grains, things like that. And that's really going to be like your key to success.
Awesome. So if
Yeah.
anyone out there has questions, we got a few of them in here. We'll jump on those. Feel
Okay.
free to ask your questions. So
Mhm.
John, who's a regular, hey John, great to see you back. He asks, "What about peanuts? Is a small portion?" Um,
Yeah. So again, nuts, seeds, and beans, they're going to be sources of phosphorus. So nuts do have phosphorus in them. Again, it goes back to how much we're actually absorbing. So that is going to be from a plant source. So we're not going to necessarily absorb um, all of it, or even like a majority of it. But we still do want to like limit the portion size. Some other things to consider with peanuts specifically is, are they salted or unsalted? And how much protein is going to be in your portion size. That's something to consider as well. So all of those things are things to take into consideration. But again, know that they are like generally a higher phosphorus item. It might be your best bet to have a smaller portion of those.
Now, here's a comment that I see a lot on message boards. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about this, where
Yeah.
people will see a certain food and those message boards will say something like, avoid bananas, too much potassium. Don't even touch an avocado, too much potassium. There's so
Mhm.
many of those don't eat list, and they're very general, not talking about stuff. How do you, what do you have to say when someone says, hey, isn't that too high in potassium, such as
Mhm.
spinach, which you mentioned earlier?
Right. So that's a great question. So we had this conversation among some of the other dietitians that I work with, but also one of our interns. She was saying, on this list, this food, and I can't remember exactly what it was, is listed as a high potassium food, but on this list it's listed as a low potassium food. Like, what's the disconnect? And so we took a look at it, and it had to do with the portion size. So on that list where it was a high potassium food, there was a cup of that particular food. And then on the low potassium list, it was half of a cup of that particular food. And so that portion size really made the difference in determining whether it was going to be a low potassium food or a high potassium food. And that goes for phosphorus as well. So portion size is going to be really, really key. So again, oftentimes it's not eliminating like the peanuts, for example, even though they do contain phosphorus and they're under that category of like foods that are higher in phosphorus. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't eat peanuts. It just means maybe we focus on a smaller portion size, and that's how we approach your nutrition, because it might be able to fit into your phosphorus budget for the day, but you just might not be able to eat like 2 cups of peanuts in a day. Maybe it's a smaller portion, like an eighth of a cup or something, or like 1 ounce of peanuts or something like that. Maybe that's the portion size that's going to be better for you rather than completely eliminating those peanuts.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word budget. That's how I was taught to eat. Because at first, of
Yeah.
course, I was afraid of everything. And when you go to the website, they pretty much make it sound like you can't eat anything. But my dietitian had me kind of think of it as a budget. I can have this much phosphorus a day or this much potassium. I need this much, even more. fiber, you need and I had all these allowances for different nutrients, and then I just used an app to track what I was eating, and I just made sure I didn't go over my allowance. And I would sit there and think, oh, you know what? And I love bananas. I'd be like, oh, I could eat like 3 bananas right now for breakfast. If I eat those 3, what am I eating for lunch? Because I'm going to use up most of my potassium allowance. So I had to kind of start thinking about that, and portion control was the key. Okay, I'm just going to have 1 banana. When I make my salad for lunch, I'm just going to have half of an avocado on it. And that allowed me to still enjoy all the foods I loved, but I just wasn't getting too much because, that, like I said earlier, we need these nutrients. What we don't need is too much of them.
Exactly.
Now, let's see. Do we have any other questions out here? If you guys have questions, this is the last live show until August. So this is your chance to get those questions in. Because after today, I've got to pack up my computer, take all the setup apart, and move to Michigan, and then get it all set up.
So, somebody did, comment that they do have like a constant struggle to keep phosphorus under control. And one thing to mention, especially to, anybody that, might be new here or might be newly diagnosed, is that we can manage phosphorus from our foods, yes, because it's found in a ton of different foods, but you can also work with your doctor to find like a medication regimen that's going to be, helpful as well. So balancing the two and talking to your doctor and saying, okay, my phosphorus has been high. What can we do about it? Working with the dietitian as well, and taking both of those approaches can be really beneficial in really making sure that you're the healthiest that you can be.
You know what we didn't talk about? Phosphorus binders. Can you talk about those a little bit? Because you kind of hinted on it there.
Yeah, so phosphorus binders are going to be a really common way that we help those that struggle with keeping their phosphorus under control. That's one, one medication that can help. So I don't personally too often have people that are on phosphorus binders. But typically you would take it like, as directed, and you would take it with foods that do contain phosphorus, which again, we've talked about it. There's a ton of foods that contain phosphorus. So you would take a phosphorus binder with it so that, again, the phosphorus binder does exactly what it sounds like it does. It binds to the phosphorus and then, helps you regulate and get rid of it, when your kidneys can't necessarily do that on their own. So again, you'll work with your doctor to see if a phosphorus binder is right for you. Sometimes it's the right answer for people if we just can't get that phosphorus under control with diet. But again, there are dietary changes that we can make. So there's those 2 different approaches.
Now, someone asked, how much phosphorus does a binder remove? Is there a fixed number, or I've never found out?
Yeah, that I'm not necessarily sure about. To be honest with you, that's a great question for like your doctor, because they'll be the expert, your doctor or pharmacist, because they'll be the expert on the medications. I can tell you the phosphorus content of a couple of different foods though. Somebody did ask, a question like, does stage 2 get rid of excessive phosphorus? And I think it's, important to talk about, we mentioned earlier, like stages 3 through 5 are really going to be like the stages that we focus on, like phosphorus, that we check phosphorus regularly, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to totally ignore phosphorus when we're talking about stages 1 and 2. So typically your kidneys can regulate the amount of phosphorus still during stage 2, but it's not something that you need to totally ignore. So it's something that you can start to be aware of. When you start to make kidney friendly changes, you can consider phosphorus during those changes as well. But again, we really start to focus stages 3 through 5. We can't but we can't necessarily ignore it in stages 1 and 2.
Yeah, and those early stages are the best time to start setting those good eating habits in place so that you can slow down, maybe even put the brakes on the progression of kidney disease. And I wish
Hmm.
more doctors would encourage kidney patients to work with a dietitian, to also work with others to, like, if they're smokers, stop the smoking so we can just put those brakes on. Maybe you won't ever see stage 3. Let's, go for that approach instead.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, um so, again, that goes back to, like, making sure that we're not um like having our CKD progress any further than it needs to. So when you do get that diagnosis, even if it's stage 1, if it's stage 2, go ahead and reach out to a dietitian. Figure out how you can eat so that you don't progress into stages like 3, 4, and 5, and then you do have to start watching your watching your phosphorus. Pretty, a little bit more vigilantly, because we don't want to get to that point.
Yeah, and it really is surprising how many foods have phosphorus added, which is that artificial kind, the one that we absorb nearly 100% of. It is, reading labels, it's shocking.
Hmm. Right. It is shocking, and it is just like one of those things that we'll talk about. Like like I said, if we had like a 30 minutes kidney 101, we'll talk about phosphorus binders as well, or excuse me, phosphorus additives as well. Because when you start eating in a more kidney friendly way, so you're focusing on more whole foods in general, so more fruits, more vegetables, those foods that haven't been you know, had things added to it, you're going to be taking in less anyway. So that's, a kidney friendly way that we want to be moving. And then also you would be taking in less phosphorus additives anyway.
Yep.
Hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Any other questions that you see here you'd like to touch on?
Let's see. Um, so somebody asked, are other ingredients in supplements that have phosphorus, are they absorbed? So this is a really good question. And I know that we were talking about like pro renal, and there's other like renal multivitamins and things like that. And one of the reasons why we'll have renal multivitamins is because they don't necessarily, well, they don't have like that added phosphorus to it. They won't contain potassium. And so that's one of the reasons why they're like a kidney specific multivitamin. So do read the label on your supplements. So I have seen like a regular multivitamin have like small amounts of phosphorus in there, or other supplements. Again, we talked about phosphorus being a preservative. They can put that in supplements as well. So just be looking through the ingredients list, and see if your supplements, as well have those phosphorus additives. And then if they do, you might want to talk to your doctor or your dietitian about a renal specific supplement that doesn't have those phosphorus additives in there, because they will. It's not uncommon to see that.
Yeah, I actually was surprised when I first was diagnosed and I started looking at the different supplements, things I needed to take, like my vitamin D and other things. And I'm just at the store looking and I'm flipping it around, and there were other ingredients, not just the vitamin D3 or anything. It was like, whoa, what are these other things in there? And
Right.
phosphorus is one of those, as a preservative. I think some are probably for color and to keep things from sticking together. It could be
Right.
surprising what else is hiding inside those things. So always read the label.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that was a really good question. So, thank you for bringing that one up. And so
Yeah, we don't have as many questions as usual.
I know that's okay though. Let's see. There was I'm wondering if my phosphorus level, um, even though it's in normal range, would be causing my excessive itching. So we touched on this earlier in the show. Like, itching can be a side effect of kidney disease, and sometimes those elevated phosphorus levels might have something to do with it. So if it is in normal range, though, phosphorus isn't necessarily the only um, it's not the only reason why you might be experiencing itching. So there are some other things that you can be looking at, like other labs that might be, not in normal range, that might be causing that itching as well. So that's a question for your doctor. It doesn't always have to be phosphorus, but it could be.
Yeah, and I have found or discovered that a lot of people will have an allergy to a medication, and it may have been something they've been taking before, but as their kidney function goes down, now it's to a point where it starts causing itching. And I had an allergy I never knew about for something that I absolutely love to eat. It's in so many foods, soy. And
Oh,
so I'm allergic to two great things, soy and blue cheese. So
oh no.
yeah, so all those, a lot of those vegetarian meals and things that are made up, like the fake meat patties, contain soy. And so I got to be a little careful. If I eat it, my mouth and throat gets really itchy right away. And before my kidneys went south, I'd eat edamame like it was popcorn. I was always
Right.
eating things like that with no problems. But now, and maybe part of it's with age, now that I'm 50, uh, these allergies have kind of surfaced to some of the foods I eat. So that might be a good thing to check on. Whoever it
Yeah.
was that posted about the itching, it could be quite a bit of
Mhm.
different causes. Talk to your doctor so you guys can find it and then take care of it.
Yeah. And somebody asked, what's the difference between phosphorus in whole plant foods versus phosphorus from processed foods and drinks? So that's a really, really good question. So that goes back to that organic and that inorganic phosphorus. So again, that phosphorus that's naturally found in those whole plant foods. Again, it's normal to have phosphorus in those foods. It's okay. But that is going to be considered organic phosphorus, and we don't absorb all of that phosphorus. So our bodies will absorb about 40 to 70% of that phosphorus that's found in those whole plant foods. Now, when we talk about the phosphorus that's found in it's found in like those processed foods and like processed drinks and things like that. Again, that's going to be our inorganic phosphorus. So that's the phosphorus that we as humans have added to the food, and we are going to be absorbing quite a bit more of it, up to 100% of it. So we're absorbing more from those processed foods and drinks. And then the type of phosphorus, again, that organic phosphorus that's found in those whole foods, we're not necessarily absorbing all of it. Again, that 40 to 70%.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Oh.
we are pretty close to the top of the hour. I think we've gotten through most of the questions. Thank
Mhm.
you so much for being here and talking about phosphorus. This is the last live show for about a month and a half. Wow. It's going to be so odd taking that time off.
Oh my gosh.
But when I get back online, oh, I'm going to have a whole new setup and hopefully a good background, not my work computer.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping everybody to create a few little videos or do like some hangouts. Sometimes on Saturday mornings, I like to just get online on YouTube. It's only on YouTube. And I do a hangout and we just kind of get in there and we talk and chat. And, an hour goes by in a blink of an eye, nothing planned. Probably be doing something like that going forward.
Mhm.
Um, and one last question I'll pop in because we do have a couple moments. There's been a
Yeah.
lot of questions about sodas, and once here, can one diet soda a day hurt me? I'll tell you, I'll let you respond to that in a second. But for me, once I learned really what was in soda, um, the diet's just so full of chemicals and things like that. I made the switch to water. My kidney health was enough of a motivation for me to break that chain. And I used to drink every meal pretty much a 2 liter of Dr. Pepper. Oh my goodness. I can't believe what I used to be putting in my body, just drinking it, all that sugar and everything else. But my advice, anyone out there drinking sodas, try to work hard, break off it, go with some water, save you a lot of money. Water's
Mhm.
delicious. So what's your tips for someone who's, maybe someone really has to have that one soda to get that caffeine kick to get them started?
Yeah, definitely. So, again, cola goes under that dark colored soda category. So again, it's really just not going to be ideal for our kidney health. So, if you have to have soda, I would highly recommend switching to a dark colored soda. Just go ahead and make that switch. Find one that you like. And really do try to make that switch, because I don't want to say never have it, but it's not going to be something that you do want to be including every day. I mean, that really is going to be like a once a week kind of thing. When it gets up to once a day, we want to consider something that we can swap it out with.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a bit of a break. I'll be gone for about 6 weeks, but I'll see you all in August. I hope everyone has a wonderful, fantastic summer. And thanks for joining us tonight. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.